loosely, advanced workflow is really just workflow. So out of the box with Eclipse, you get workflow, but it comes with what we call a one-step workflow. So you see on the right here with a box highlighted around it, that's what we consider one step. So anything you can do with if-then logic, for instance, if it's approved, then send it to Brent. Send him an email. That is a one-step approval. That's included in the core product at no charge. If you wanted a multi-step workflow, which is typically if-then-else logic, that's where you'd buy this advanced workflow module. The two are the same, full-featured. All the same functions are available. It's just a matter of can you use multi-step or not, and that's the delineation in terms of an additional charge. The actual license for the advanced workflow piece is based on a server, so it's a one-time on-premise. I guess I misspelled that there. But if you are licensing it by, if you are a cloud consumer, you would then license it by user. And so you'd have to buy essentially a workflow license for every user, regardless if that user is going to use workflow or not. We can review that with you in more detail, but from a commercial standpoint, that is our licensing. Okay, so we'll get into some of where you actually find and can access workflows. So when a workflow is assigned to you, if you're familiar with Eclipse, you're going to find the workflow tab, or in your navigation panel on your left on the bottom, you're going to see a workflows. If there's a workflow assigned to you, you can click there as well, and that will launch your available workflows. We'll go over a little of the security and configuration. You're going to need obviously some rights to be able to access the workflow designer within the administration tab. If that's not showing up for you, you do have to be assigned a workflow administrator with a couple other feature access permissions, which we'll go over in a little more detail. Again, the whole idea of workflow, if you are a 3X user, a legacy Docstar user, then you'll notice that templates are now called workflows. So templates and content types and workflows are all kind of synonymous with the same thing. When you build out your content types, you're going to see a workflow box there, and that's where the content type by default will use that workflow. Okay, so you can certainly switch that as you need to, as we'll see in the demonstration. So workflows can be both capture-based or document-based, and what I mean by that is if you want a document to come in and you want to do some pre-processing on it, like a zone OCR or a full-text content search, then you can make certainly capture-oriented type decisions, things like OCR barcode separation and various other types of capture scenarios. But also when the document is then brought into the system, you can execute different document-based workflows. So we're going to go through the different kind of categories of actions and functions that are available for that. There's essentially three types of triggers. Certainly a user initiation, which means that a user clicks a button, submit button, approve button, whatever it might be. That obviously would trigger that if-then-else logic. But certainly can be done based on event, a due date, an expiration date, a retention date. You'll notice in the core product, we also supply a records management or record category you see here. That can also be part of a workflow, as well as system-generated things. So, you know, the system can execute different tasks based on a metadata value. So if it sees that it is approved and the field is approved, then it would automatically initiate some system-generated event. So we'll go through that in a little more detail here. All right, so the main categories, and these aren't like all that's here, but there's 73 total functions in our action library. But as I went over, we have things like capture-based solutions, metadata. So what I mean by that is we can do all sorts of manipulation, substrings, joins, kind of concatenations of metadata. So if we were, for instance, to read a file name, as we brought in a particular file name, we can parse on a delimiter or something to that effect, or change the format of a specific field, like the title field, to add some additional metadata that we might find, or add or remove change values. It's a very powerful solution. Again, it all comes in the core product. It's just a matter of if you want to use the multi-step or not. In a lot of cases, 3.x customers are familiar with the prompt for value, where you get prompted to enter a value, and this can be a drop-down, this can be a predefined set of values like a document type, or it can just ask you for a value like a purchase order number, which we'll see in our demonstration. We can also do all sorts of mathematical equations, things like aggregating two numbers or finding the difference between two numbers. Various things like that are included. We also have a new feature that allows you to also do what we call a global replace. Take a particular value and go back and update all of the other values. So for instance, a check comes in and it pays 3 invoices. We want to go to all 3 of those invoices and update the check number. That's a new feature in our 16.24 release. Obviously, routing and notifications, requesting approvals, notifications via email with a hyperlink in it, all of that is certainly available and easy to use within the core system. Database lookups, which we'll start with the data link, and we'll do that as a PO process along with an AP invoice. That's basically just a database lookup, as well as workflow. Like for instance, if you need to change a workflow on the fly or reassign that particular workflow, that can be either done on the system or a manual basis. The ad hoc permissions and various security classes can be also auto-assigned. So for instance, if somebody has to capture a document, but because of the type of document, they know they can't view that document, so we can remove their permissions upon submission of that particular workflow. So those are just a couple of the main categories associated with that. Now there's several ways, as I pointed out, to execute a particular workflow. So you'll see the color coding on the right there, and there's yellow and blue or just yellow, so those have a defined meaning. Blue means that you have to have the client application running, and those types of things are typically imaging based. Okay, so OCR splitting, barcoding, and so in your system tray you see here in the red box there's a little globe. That is the Docstar Eclipse client that would be running, and those things require that client. Things that are yellow mean that a user has to initiate it. Okay, so they have to either click on something or enter a value to initiate that workflow. And you'll see that when we enter our purchase order when it prompts for value. Anything with a blue and a yellow means that it can be automatically run. So those are system-generated type executions. All right, so you're going to notice at kind of the root level of the workflow, there's a few different features. One, the top there, you see there's kind of the exception triggers. Think of it as if there's an issue with a workflow or it fails, how do you want to deal with that exception and who's in charge of that? So that's ultimately trigger mode and trigger exception are specific to that. So do you want to send an email? Do you want to reassign it? And who are you sending it to? And so those can be user-based or group-based. The assignee mode is something that I don't know that a lot of people know about, but this is essentially how we route documents. So there's some predefined kind of routing mechanisms within the workflow. So certainly user, and there's some variables that you can use for that. So you'll see in our demonstration, we want to pick specific users. So in some cases, you might say, hey, by vendor, I approve. Okay, so we might have to have a control table that says Brent approves ABC Company and Acme Corp, but Betty approves, Verizon and Yahoo. So as a result, those types of invoices can be done on a user assignee mode. Then we have the built-in ones like round robin, which basically sends it to a user in a group and then to the second person and the third person, just like a round robin within a tennis match where you have it goes to a person, then sequentially escalates to the next person, and then the next person. Random is essentially used for things like surveys where it's completely random. It picks from the group of available users in the system. Load balance is ideal for things like CSR, customer service reps, and various other types of situations where you have a kind of, you want to load balance the work across the different queues. So it looks at the number of documents in a queue and then equally balances that particular distribution of the workflow. And then whole group, this is where you send to the entire group. Everyone needs to respond, or in some cases you can just have first to respond, and we can work in situations like that. So these are kind of predefined routing based on the assignee mode. Okay, so let's just go into a little bit. So the request for input in this particular case, you'll see we have a number of different predefined prompts, things that will, you don't have to configure. So prompt for folder is going to prompt you for a folder. Obviously, content type is going to be a drop down of all the available content types in the system. And really the prompt is kind of the most synonymous with the 3X template. You can also, what you'll see here is when you prompted for something, that value that you enter can then push to a next step. And again, that's where you would then need the multi-step approval, the advanced workflow module. And we can get in, certainly from a licensing perspective and pricing, reach out to myself or any of your sales reps at PIF Technologies for more pricing on that. All right, creating workflows, you're going to see a box like this task editor. You're going to see inputs and outputs. They can be a little confusing, but the reality is an input is something that the workflow is going to ingest, and the output is where you want that, whatever we've done on that field, wherever you want that value to be placed. In this case, you see it's a PO number, so we prompt for a PO number, and whatever you enter into that box will be placed in the PO number field, and then you'll see multiple things occur downstream. Now, in certain situations, certain tasks provide the ability to put multiple inputs. So as you see in the screenshot to your far right, assignee and content type. When we do that, you'll see in the format, you'll see a squiggly 0 and a squiggly 1. So assignee becomes a 0. We always use kind of the first box as 0 and then 1, and then again, incrementally the next add in an input field would be 2. So in this particular case, you'll see that it defines, in this case, AP invoice, the assignee, maybe that's my name, and then the content type, AP invoice or PO or whatever it is, and then it actually will output the title with that particular name. So the output would be the title in this particular case. You can use things like literals. You'll notice that when we go into email, I'll have literally you put quotes around. So if you want the output or the input to be approved for your invoice status, so the input be approved and your output might be invoice status. And this way, the invoice status for that particular document would be marked as approved. You're also going to notice on the task editor here, you'll find that there's quite a few of these dollar signs and then some variable like accessed on, approval count, assignee. These are defined, system-defined variables, meaning you can set the assignee to a specific user, and that user would then become the workflow assignee. He would then go, or that person would go to their queue and see that particular type. In this particular case, a workflow. Created on, we can then, obviously set that particular field to the created on date, created user, all those different things. So you have essentially the content, what we refer to as system variables, and then field variables. And so you'll see that where instead of the dollar sign, you'll have dollar sign field dot, and then you see here in our output field dot PO number. So those are all your custom fields, all your fields that show up in your content types, and you'll see it will allow us to auto type, and it will show all available fields. You also have kind of your, well, they are system generated fields. You have things like text and status and title. So one of the new features within the 1624 is the ability to have a status field. So above the document viewer control, if you have an exception within your particular workflow, you can enable status, as your exception field, and that would then show any issue, essentially put the issue with the particular workflow and why it wouldn't fire within above the document viewer control. The text field is designed for OCR. If you want a full text OCR document, you're going to be able to set the output to text, and that would allow for keyword searching within a image-based file. Okay. All right, so some of the capture workflow things you can do, you'll see here, here's a quick screenshot of an OCR. Again, we're using the text output, and that's just the text layer essentially on the document. And the get region is essentially the ability to assign an OCR XY coordinate. So we're going to go through that in one of our scenarios. Certainly, the difficulty in doing any OCR is how much white space you have around a character you're looking to extract. So in this case, as you see on our right, we're just reading all the text on the document and putting it in our text variable. But in some cases, you might want to extract an invoice number. You really need to understand that this particular OCR engine requires an XY coordinate, and you're going to actually draw a zone. And should your page shift or you're scanning at different resolutions, that's going to really impact your success with this particular type of engine. It also, as you can see up here, cleanup options, deskewing, inverting, all those types of things. You're going to want to enable some of that depending on the type of capture you're going to be doing. All right, so you do have two different kinds of, I guess what we'll call extraction and OCR. So when you have things that are already electronic, things like Word and text documents, you're going to want to use the extract text function. This doesn't OCR, it simply pulls essentially all of the computer-generated text into our OCR catalog, whereas OCR will physically take image-based documents and read all the data off of it. And as you can imagine, extract text is a lot quicker and a lot more accurate because it starts electronic, it ends electronic, versus OCR where it's actually extracting from an image-based document. Okay, so we'll show a little bit about that, but there's actually two separate functions, one for extract text, that's what you're going to use for electronic documents. All right, so database lookups certainly can do this in a number of different ways, but if you're familiar with data link, I'm not going to go into data linking today, but as I said, on our webpage, there's several data link videos for you to watch. So in this particular case, as you see here, I have an AP workflow, and the input, or our variable here, PO number, is going to be going into the PO number field. So whatever I enter in the user prompt in my step one, it's going to add it to the PO number field. That's going to go to our input variable, and it's going to go out to our dynamics GP table here and go and pull all the other information. So we're going into a little more detail. We're going to show how that works, and we're going to build that live. You'll also see the fields on the left in the output section. Those are all the columns in the Dynamics GP database. And the fields on the right in your text box are the ones within Eclipse. So you're basically saying, hey, where do you want to put the vendor name that I got from the SQL database? Do you want to put that in the vendor name field? Obviously. In this case, I have it all nice matched up. But your columns don't always match up that nicely. All right, the last piece here is the branch conditions. So this is where you get into that advanced workflow. So branch conditions means multi-step. And so you see here in our example, we send it for approval. And if somebody clicks the approve button, or condition is approved, which is a system variable, move it to the processed step. Okay. If it's denied, move it to the exception step. And then that defines what happens there. So you have these kind of conditions: is approved, is denied, those types of things. And again, those can be either user generated or user initiated, or automatic, in this case automatic. Your line types are straight, flowchart, or Bezier. All that does is, you see the blue line in the chart on the left there, that just changes the line a bit. So it really doesn't do much, but graphically shows in the map what line and where it goes. So that's essentially how that works. All right, so the demonstration I'm going to do today, we're going to build out, I'll first show the approval routing. So we're going to request a value, in this case a PO. We're going to go out to a database. We're going to take that PO value. We're going to go populate other information. And then we're going to route it for approval. We're going to send it to a specific user's queue. And then if he approves it or if he denies it, it's going to then move to an appropriate folder. Okay. The second one we're going to do is an HR batch. So we're going to use barcode and OCR cover sheets. And we're going to read the barcode and the OCR values in the cover sheets. And then we're going to split on the barcode. We're going to then delete the barcode page. And then we're going to move it to the appropriate employee folders. Okay. So that's more of a capture scenario. And then we're going to kind of just share a very complex, sophisticated workflow, multi-level approvals with all sorts of math, the use of variables, and then the ability to push that information into another system. Okay, so those are the three things that we're going to go over in more detail. Now, I know you might have some questions. There's a question panel on the right. So before we stop today, we'll answer everybody's questions. But for now, we're going to just move to the demonstration portion. All right, so first things first, we're going to open up our Eclipse here. And as you can see, it's very similar to what you might be used to. So on the admin side, we're going to first go here. And I'm just going to show you the security you need to get this Workflow Designer. So under the Workflow tab here, you see this Workflow Designer. So by default, you're going to need this, let me scroll down here, you're going to need the Workflow Administrator. You're going to need the ability to see fields and the ability where the custom lists. Let's see, lists. So you need basically, manage custom lists. Okay, so these three obviously will give you the field and the list here, which you're going to need to do to create any variables and select fields, and then the Workflow Designer, which would allow you to do that. Now I'm an admin here, so I'm not going to need that. Now there's two ways to access the designer. If I click on the link, it's going to load in this kind of iframe underneath here. If I click the little open, it will launch a new tab, and I find that it's easier to kind of work with this that way. Okay, so the invoice approval process that I have here that I've set up, and I'm going to go into my first step. So the first step, I'm doing the set assignee. I'm just going to use the user, and I'm literally selecting from a user. Okay, so I want all AP invoices to be approved by Brent Wessler. Okay, now you can automatically assign this on the fly based on some rules, but you'll see here I have a rule. If you don't have an action already set, you can hit add. Otherwise, I have one already set, so I'm going to hit our edit, and double click also allows you to enter. And in this case, I'm going to be prompting a user to enter a purchase order number, and I'm going to be putting that purchase order number in this PO number field. You'll notice when I type in fields, and I don't even need to do that, I could just type in PO, and you'll see that it automatically brings open everything that I need. In this case, I'm going to use the PO number. You also have all of your libraries full of different variables, certainly field name and things like that, and you can literally just drag on top of that field as well. That's another way to do it. Okay. All right, so once I've grabbed the purchase order number, I'm going to pass that on to the next step. And so the next step is going to be essentially the ability to go out and pass that variable into a data link. And you'll see here, I'm passing that PO number as my input, and the output will be these particular fields. In the exception field, I can also put in our status. So this isn't a field, it's a variable, system variable status. And if there is an exception, it will show up above our document. Okay. And then once I've done that, I'm going to request approval. Okay, so I'm now going to initiate an approval request. So there's two steps here. One is the request approval. And again, you can put assignee in here if you're routing this based on an assignee. or in this particular case, I can hard code my particular email. This is where you're either going to notify or not that particular user and whether an approval is required or not. Anything that you're not totally understanding, you do have this task info, which describes each one of these different settings. So it gives you a little bit more detail as to what's happening. You also notice down at the bottom here the create new. These are, as with any type of workflow, you get into it and then you find that, hey, oh, I really need a new list or I need a new field. So by clicking here, it will allow you to essentially ad hoc create a field or a list, any of these data types here, so that you don't have to physically, go in and create that on another screen and have to leave this screen. Okay, so then we're going to ask the user, because we have to, see here, user approval, we have to actually ask them a question. In this particular case, please approve or deny. So when you go and we do this, you'll see what it actually does. At the end of the process, you're going to notice here in our approvals branch, is approved, is denied, and where it goes to. So if it's denied, it's going to move to the exception, in this case to the right. Okay, and if it's approved, it's going to go to the left. Now, if it moves to, in this particular case, approved, you're going to notice our action is simple. It's just going to move it to a particular folder or add to a particular folder. So the way that this works is you give it some input. In this case, it's going to add a process folder underneath accounting AP invoices. So you basically give it a starting folder, and when I click in that area, it gives essentially the folder tree, and it will automatically apply that particular input. In this particular case, you could also change the security class. This is most useful when you get into situations like HR approvals, or when you're onboarding and you're intaking medical information as well as salary information, and you need those to be in different folders which have different security classes. So you can then apply the right level of security and ensure that that document is not being touched. Okay, so you'll notice when I click the edit button here, that's where you get all of the exception routing. So in this case, you'll see I have no trigger mode, and any exceptions go to Brent. But this is if there is an issue with the workflow, what's going to happen to it. Okay, so that's under your edit menu. You can certainly email this, you can print this, and then you certainly can save this as a new one. So if you want to make a secondary invoice approval, maybe with a little different workflow, you can do the save as, and that will essentially create a copy of this particular workflow. All right, so let's just take a quick look. We're going to go in and we're going to capture a document. So I'm going to browse out. I'm going to grab my invoice here, and we're going to bring in this particular document, and we're going to actually show that workflow that we just looked at. Okay, so this is now there, and you'll see under the workflow I have invoice approval. Now you can certainly change that as you need to. In this case, I'm fine with it, so I'm going to hit the submit button. And it's a little slow, but down here this workflow will be will show a 1 next to it, and then I'm going to go over to my workflow queue, and you'll see here now, because I have this dedicated to a specific static user, and if I go to Brent Wessler, you see it shows up in Brent Wessler's queue. You can certainly see the assignee is Brent Wessler. So when you open that up, now you'll see the workflow panel. Just make sure that that workflow panel is open, and you can see it's prompting me for a value. So if I type in the purchase order value and I hit the submit button, what's going to happen here is it's going to automatically come back and populate all of that information. So it's basically doing the data link there. Okay. So the second step is the approval. So you'll notice how my particular document is staying open. So there's a user preference. It's called workflow submit action. So I have it just submitting. I don't have it moving to the next record. So certainly if you need to approve, several of these documents, you probably want to submit and move to next selected item. Otherwise, you can just use the submit. So once I apply my signature here to this particular document, apply that here, I'm going to hit the approve button, and then when that hits approve, what's going to happen is by default now it gets moved to the process directory. So you'll see down here now added it to the process directory. And if I now go to my accounting, AP invoices processed, you'll see the one we just captured, which is right at the top with our signature on it. So it's just a real simple, send it to one user, have that user go into the queue, approve it, and then it moves it to a separate folder. Okay, very simple. All right, so the next one we're going to do is an HR approval. And so in this particular case, let me just save this quickly. HR. Okay, so this is a real simple one, but this is where we're going to take a stack of documents, and we're going to bring them in, and we're going to barcode and OCR separate. So the first one is the barcode. So we drag over the barcode here, and the output in this particular case is the employee's name. Now, we use this get region here, and you'll notice when we do that, you have to put in something to find a document. So in this particular case, you'll see we're going to be looking at this particular page. So we're going to look at the current page, and we're going to be extracting this barcode area. So to do that, you just right-click and you get your recognition, and then you can draw a zone. Okay, and that's how it knows where to extract it. I'm going to hit cancel here. I don't mess that up. Then you need to tell it what kind of barcode it is. We support all 1 and 2D barcodes. You just need, this is an extra module, so depending on your needs, 1D barcodes, things like code 39 extended, will allow for things like spaces and capitalization, lowercase letters. Code 39 is typically the best one to work with because it requires a terminator, which means that when it reads lines that are outside of that particular barcode, it will ignore them. Okay. Enhancement, obviously, if you want to enhance the barcode to ensure for the best quality. So we're going to read the barcode, we're going to read the employee name, then we're going to grab the document type. Okay, so in this particular case, we're going to look at the type of document it is. We go to our same thing, and you'll see here we're looking in the top here under the type area. Okay. Now these barcode cover sheets can be created a number of different ways. Typically Word, mail merge, however you want. It's really just a font. A barcode is a font. And we have a barcode cover sheet creator if you're interested in that. This really allows you to take things like terminated employee file folders, things that have a defined set, and allows you to really work with those and get them in. So then we're going to do the split on the barcode here. So any barcode we find, in this case the 3 and 9, we want to then remove, split and then remove the barcode page. Okay. Okay, so once we're done there, then we're going to automatically create a folder. So we're going to read, obviously, that barcode value, which we placed in the output of employee name. And so we're going to basically say, hey, our starting folder is a human resources. Underneath that, then I want, whatever employee name, Brent Wessler. And it's going to automatically create that folder for us. Okay? Then we're going to remove, essentially, everything comes into the root HR folder, so we're just going to remove everything from that root folder, and then we're going to format the title so that we have the employee name and the type of document it is using our advanced formatting. So advanced formatting, as you see here, we're going to use in this case, the employee name and the document type, and we're going to have that be set as the title. So we'll end up with, in this case, the name, and then let me get rid of that name, and then underscore the type. Okay, so we'll do that. Okay. All right, so that's what's going to happen here. So let's now execute that particular process. So we're going to our capture, and I'm going to go to my HR document, and we'll browse out, and let me grab an HR document here. And this is going to be a packet, essentially. So HR with cover, it's I think an 8-page document. So it has essentially a barcode cover sheet for Brent, and then 2 documents for Brent, and then another document. Let's just take a quick look at, oh, here we go. So we have it on the left here. So you see here's the Howard Stern, and then the second page would be his resume. And then they go to the third page, is another barcode. for Maggie, and then underneath that is the W-4 for Maggie, and then we have Brent and his W-4. So what's going to happen here is this one 8-page document is going to be separated into 3 documents, and they're going to be automatically indexed into the appropriate area. Okay, so we're going to come in here and apply and do the submit. Okay, so what's going to happen is that document will now be processed, and we should be able to go now to our HR folder. So Brent, here's Brent's document. So this is essentially what happened. The title, as you see, Brent _ W4. So it basically read that, it imported, and then automatically assigned the doc type and the employee name and put it into Brent's folder very easily, very nicely. Then we have Maggie. You see here, this is that. And you see here, Maggie May, and the doc type gets automatically assigned. And then we have Howard Stern, and again, his document with his resume comes in. So what we've done there is taken a batch scanning type capability, where you can take multiple pages in a single document and use the barcode as the separator and also as the indexing page. And then certainly you can then search however you want. I can search for Howard Stern up here, or you can simply just go to his particular folder in this case. All right, so convert to text. This is a real simple one. So this is something I use for all images, and I'm going to use the OCR one. And what I do here is I pick any document. So I go into any region, and you're going to see essentially when I click on any document, you notice how I made the zone over the entire page. Okay, so the zone's over the entire page. This is how you're going to use keyword searching, and then I put whatever's left in this text box or this text output. So what ends up happening is when I go to assign anything, for instance, if I was going to take this and I go to take Howard's resume and go to assign workflow, I can go to my convert text, and when I do that, it's going to OCR the entire page and put that into a text element. So if we now go in, you'll see here convert to text. It's in its process. You see anything that a user doesn't have to interact with, anything that's system generated, you're going to see it goes into the distributed queue, and you can see what the process and how long it's taking and if it's going to be complete. And once you see complete, then it actually will allow you to search for common words within the body of the document. So if I was looking for Main Street, something like that, it brings open Howard's resume. And when I open this up, you're going to see here, if I go down to the show hits or show document text, it's going to do the same thing. This is the text element. So when we say $ text, essentially all of this data that you see here is in that text element, and then it highlights in blue where you're able to find it. So that convert to text is very useful. You can apply it to any workflow, and then if you're doing a multi-step workflow, you can just add that as an additional step. Okay, so that's what that piece is.